Have you ever pondered why the Rosetta Stone, a critical piece in deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphics, resides in the British Museum, far from its Egyptian roots? This is just one of the many examples of cultural artifacts and treasures that find themselves miles away from their places of origin, housed in foreign museums. It's a topic that stirs up a whirlwind of opinions, sparking debates that are as old as the artifacts themselves. As we delve into this issue, we'll explore the profound implications of returning these treasures to their rightful homes. We'll examine the potential for cultural restitution and reconciliation, the possibilities for preservation and display within their own cultural contexts, and how this could influence international relations. But it's not all smooth sailing. We'll also confront the legal, ethical, and logistical challenges this process would present, and the impact on British museums, research, and education. Indeed, the question of whether such treasures should be returned to their countries of origin is a complex and multifaceted issue. Cultural restitution, the act of returning stolen or lost artifacts to their rightful owners, has the potential to address historical injustices. It's a hot topic that resonates deeply with nations across the world. Think about it. When a stolen artifact is returned, it's not just about the physical object. It's a gesture that acknowledges and attempts to heal the wounds of the past. Take Greece, for instance, where long-standing demands for the return of the Parthenon marbles, taken by Britain in the early 19th century, have become a symbol of national pride and cultural identity. Or Nigeria, whose Benin bronzes, looted during a punitive expedition by British forces in the late 19th century, are scattered in museums around the world. These nations aren't just seeking the return of their cultural heritage, they're seeking a form of justice. Returning these artifacts can represent a significant step towards rectifying historical injustices. Imagine seeing the Elgin marbles in the Parthenon, where they were originally meant to be displayed. This evocative statement opens up a whole world of possibilities that could come to fruition if Britain were to return stolen treasures to their countries of origin. One of the most profound impacts would be the opportunity for these nations to preserve and display these artifacts in their original cultural contexts. This is a powerful proposition. Artifacts, after all, are not just objects. They are tangible links to our past, imbued with stories, traditions, and meanings that resonate most deeply in the places they originate from. By returning these treasures, we would be enabling countries to reclaim these stories and share them in their most authentic forms. Picture an Egyptian child marveling at an ancient sarcophagus in Cairo, rather than London. Imagine a Greek historian studying the Parthenon marbles in Athens, where they were first chiseled. There's a certain magic to seeing artifacts in their native setting, a depth of understanding that can't be replicated in a foreign museum. But the effects of such an act wouldn't stop at cultural enrichment. It could also have profound implications for international relations. The return of stolen artifacts is not just about objects, it's about respect, reconciliation, and reparation. It's about acknowledging past wrongs and taking tangible steps to right them. This could send a powerful message to the international community. It could show that Britain is committed to addressing historical injustices and fostering mutual respect among nations. This act could serve as a catalyst for dialogue, fostering goodwill and cooperation between Britain and the countries it has wronged in the past. It could open up new avenues for diplomatic relations, building bridges of understanding and collaboration. In a world often marked by division and discord, such a gesture could be a beacon of hope. It could signal a new era of international relations based on mutual respect and shared cultural heritage. The act of returning stolen treasures could foster goodwill and cooperation, enhancing international relations. Returning stolen treasures is not as simple as packing them up and shipping them off. There are legal, ethical, and logistical challenges that make this a complex issue. One of the primary challenges is the impact on museum collections. Many of these artifacts are housed in British museums, and returning them would mean a significant loss. Museums would need to reevaluate their exhibits and perhaps even their acquisition policies. This could lead to a fundamental shift in how museums operate and the role they play in preserving and presenting history. The return of these artifacts also poses challenges for research and education. British institutions often use these artifacts for study, contributing to our understanding of world history and culture. Without access to these artifacts, they may need to find alternative ways to facilitate this research. Another significant challenge is determining rightful ownership. Many of these artifacts were acquired during colonial times, and tracing their provenance can be complicated. Disputes may arise over the authenticity of claims, or there may be competing claims from different countries. This is a delicate issue that involves not just legal considerations but also ethical ones. The repatriation process itself is fraught with complexities. Establishing a fair and transparent process for the return of artifacts is no small task. It requires legal and administrative frameworks that can handle the intricacies involved. It's not just about returning the artifacts, but returning them to their rightful owners. And that is a process that demands meticulous attention to detail. These challenges require thoughtful consideration and careful navigation. It's not enough to simply acknowledge the need for cultural restitution. The process of returning stolen treasures must be handled with the utmost care, taking into account not just the legal and logistical aspects, but also the ethical implications. In the end, the goal is not just to return artifacts, but to do so in a way that promotes reconciliation, respects cultural heritage, and fosters a greater understanding of our shared history. The artifacts in question are often tied to a nation's colonial legacy. This legacy is a complex web of historical events, laden with instances of colonization, theft, and unethical acquisition of cultural artifacts. These artifacts, often seen as trophies of conquest, were plucked away from their cultural roots and displayed in museums and private collections far from their homelands. The restitution of such artifacts to their countries of origin is more than just a physical act of return. It's a symbolic gesture, a way of addressing the historical injustices that stem from Britain's colonial past. This, indeed, is a past that saw the systematic looting of cultural treasures from across the globe, treasures that were integral parts of the countries they were taken from. This plundering was not simply a case of theft, it was a profound violation of the cultural and spiritual identity of these nations, an erasure of their historical narratives. Many of these artifacts were not just objects of art or historical interest, but sacred symbols, repositories of ancient knowledge, and keystones of cultural identity. The return of these artifacts is a step towards acknowledging and confronting this colonial legacy. It's a way of saying, we recognize the wrongs that were done, and we are committed to making amends. This isn't just about rectifying historical injustices, but also about fostering dialogue, understanding, and reconciliation between nations. However, we must also acknowledge that this process is fraught with complexities. It requires an honest reckoning with history, a clear understanding of the context in which these artifacts were acquired, and a commitment to transparency and fairness in the process of restitution. It's important to remember that the return of these artifacts is not merely a matter of righting historical wrongs, it also provides an opportunity for these nations to reclaim their cultural heritage, to reintegrate these stolen pieces of their history into their national narrative, and to enhance their citizens' understanding and appreciation of their own heritage. The return of artifacts can serve as an acknowledgement of past wrongs, and a commitment to righting those wrongs. It's a step towards a more equitable and just world, where cultural heritage is respected and protected, not plundered and displayed as trophies of conquest. Scene script: should Britain return some artifacts while retaining others? And if so, how should those decisions be made? This is where the concept of partial versus full restitution comes into play. It's a middle ground approach that could potentially satisfy both sides of the debate. In this case, Britain might choose to return some cultural artifacts while retaining others. But how should such decisions be made? The criteria could be multifaceted and complex, just like the issue at hand. One possibility is to consider the historical and cultural significance of the artifact for the country of origin. If an artifact is a crucial part of a nation's history and identity, it might be a prime candidate for restitution. Another factor could be the conditions under which the artifact was acquired. Was it taken during a time of conflict or colonization? Was it bought or exchanged freely? These questions could help determine the ethics of keeping or returning the artifact. The state of preservation and the capacity of the country of origin to adequately care for and display the artifact could also be considered. After all, the ultimate goal is to ensure that these treasures are preserved and appreciated for generations to come. Let's take a moment to reflect on the key points we've discussed throughout this video. Returning stolen treasures represents a significant step towards addressing historical injustices and promoting cultural restitution. It can enhance public understanding and appreciation of global heritage and potentially foster goodwill and cooperation in international relations. However, it's not without challenges. Legal, ethical, and logistical issues abound. as do potential disputes over rightful ownership and provenance. British museums and research institutions would also need to adapt to the potential loss of valuable exhibits and resources. In conclusion, the return of stolen treasures is a complex issue with far-reaching implications. It requires thoughtful consideration and a balanced approach that respects all parties involved. It's a journey towards cultural restitution that we must navigate with care, understanding, and above all, respect for our shared global heritage.